My name is Allison Matthews. I'm a service designer at the Mayo Clinic with our innovation and design team. I had a unique opportunity to work with the CAR T cell therapy team as they developed the service line for patients to understand it through human-centered design and to develop an experience that we felt was ideal. We used a process that is very familiar to human-centered design, but different from the typical process for service line development in healthcare. First, we scanned and framed. So rather than knowing exactly what we wanted to do logistically and focusing on the tasks that we had to get done, we focused on really understanding unmet user needs and their experiences. We looked both inside of healthcare at the experience that patients were having in our clinical trials, and we looked outside of healthcare at similar experiences that could lend to the complexity that we were experiencing. We then experimented with different ideas, not being tied to them as solutions. Once we found good ideas, we prototyped them and we started to validate them as tangible models. Then we transitioned this service line to the operational ownership so that they can continue to iterate on it and make it something that was able to be delivered to patients at all times. To do this, we did several interviews. We worked with 21 patient and caregiver pairs. Importantly, we looked at the patient with their caregiver as we think that this is critical to their experience. We did over 50 total interviews. We saw a wide range of patients, and we spent our time with them consistently throughout the entire phase. So we were at home with patients as they received their diagnosis. And then we spent time with them in the clinic, in their hotel, and we spent time with them during their collection and chemotherapy and infusion phases. So we really embedded ourselves in the process to understand fully what the patients were experiencing. From that, we were able to develop the CAR T cell therapy journey to understand what it looked like. We mapped it first, looking at what they were doing. So what are the things that they're actually going through, what they're thinking and feeling? How could we communicate this through narrative arcs that would better help our care teams understand the experiences that they're having, what the pain points were, and the different opportunities for change. You can see here that we did this through mapping each and every interaction that the patient had with the care team. All of those blue dots are a single interaction they're having with the care team. And then we had salient quotes where they said things like, "I don't remember any of it. That makes it so much worse to wonder what I did and things that I said. This is nothing like his transplant. This is by far the worst week of my entire life." Our care team was fantastic. They didn't take these things as insults or as a criticism to the care that they were giving, but understanding that as we're providing excellent care, the experience might not match. And how could we make that better? We then went and talked about the things that we could do better, things like better setting expectations, providing patients and caregivers with a venue to connect, and understanding the ways that we could do that. So better education, transplant education, and note paper. So giving the teams this feedback was very meaningful. We then set a set of principles that would help the care team develop the experience further. So our first was to set expectations emotionally and logistically. We found that patients were ready for the logistical steps, but not the emotional aspect that came with it. We wanted patients to be prepared to have better decision-making and interactions with the care team. They had a lot of encounters with the care team, but they weren't sure what types of decisions would need to be made at each step. And we really wanted the teams to have very frank and honest communication about side effects. Care teams, in order to not scare patients, would often downplay the effects that the patients might have. And that was something that patients really felt strongly should not have happened and wished that people had been more honest with them. We also wanted to support the care team in creating a coordinated experience. We wanted every team member to understand their role as well as the contribution of other team members. When you have a very complex service line, often you only understand your role rather than understanding the role that other people are playing, which creates a risk for redundancy or even times when what you say is in conflict with someone else. We encouraged warm handoffs between team members to create a sense of caring for patients and seamless connection. So they knew that we were all working together, that wasn't just happening behind the scenes. We really felt that a coordinated experience with defined roles and tasks allowed the program to grow over time. So importantly, as we anticipate that this will expand, we wanted it to happen organically and in a way that supported the patient experience. And we felt that this excellent coordination would set us apart in a competitive market. We told the team it was very important to package information from the patient perspective. So for us at Mayo Clinic, patient education is distinct from patient information. So patient education might be side effects of a treatment they're having, and patient information might be where they can get something to eat. But for the patient and the caregiver, these things are really tied together, and we wanted to package them together. We wanted the patient education to be curated based on their own personal journey. So we didn't want to say things like, turn to page 5 and only read paragraph 3. We wanted them to know that the information we were giving them was specific to them, and we thought about them as we put it together. We wanted the care team members to be able to better interact with the content that we were providing patients in terms of patient education and support the patient. So it wasn't just read this, it's let's go through this together so we both understand what you know. And it was very important that the patient education material was completely relevant to the patient disease. Early on in creating the CAR T cell therapy line, we would take information from other cancer service lines or from bone marrow transplant and have them look at it and just read the relevant parts. This felt to the patients like it wasn't really about them and they weren't sure what was relevant and what to expect. It's also incredibly important that we design information in a way that helps patients and caregivers plan. We found that the way that we displayed appointments at Mayo Clinic lacked features that helped caregivers and patients plan their day. What we would do is just list the appointments that they would have and not show them the time in between or even show them the length in the appointment. So they wanted to know, like, when can I get lunch? When can I call my sister and share what happened? We wanted them to be able to better plan their day. And we wanted to pair that information with patient education, as I spoke to earlier, so that not only did they know that they could have a lunch break, but here are a few good places that they could get something to eat. So the next few slides show the interventions that we had on the experience. First was to take a look at our website. Early on, our website basically said, we have CAR T cell therapy, you should come to us. And what we found was patients had a lot of questions about this complex service line. So we changed our website to be more patient-friendly. We added a frequently asked questions area. We added an infographic that outlined the complex steps so they knew what they were calling about and exactly what to expect. And then we made it really easy to find the specific dedicated phone line that patients could call to get very specific information about these appointments. Mayo Clinic has a wonderful online opportunity called Mayo Clinic Connect for patients to work with other patients and caregivers who are having the same experiences. This gave patients the opportunity to ask practical questions to other patients who had been through the same experiences. But even more importantly, after they go through CAR T cell therapy, patients are able to return back and provide information to new patients, which they found to be incredibly therapeutic and a nice way to really close the loop of their experience. When we first started up our CAR T cell therapy line, it was very difficult to have schedulers understand the complexity of the scheduling that needed to happen, as well as answer the very complex questions that patients were asking. So we very simply put together guidelines for scheduling so they knew what needed to happen, in what order, and if there were any special things that they needed to know. So labs should be scheduled before 10 a.m. because the patients are fasting. And then we gave them very basic education so that when patients asked questions that said, what is the first step, or how long will this take? Why would I do this? The people on the phone had the right answers and felt confident in both answering their questions and when they needed to escalate it to someone with more knowledge. We then developed a video that all patients were sent once their first appointment was scheduled. It was one of our nurse coordinators walking through every single appointment the patient would have and outlining what would happen at each of those appointments. Patients were confused about things like seeing a cardiologist or a neurologist to establish a baseline prior to their treatment. Patients would say, I have cancer, I don't need to see a neurologist. This video really helped the patients understand what it was that they were going to be experiencing and why. We also found that patients shared this with their loved ones. They showed their neighbor before they went away to Mayo Clinic for a while. They sent it to their sister so that she would feel more confident in what was happening. This gave the patients a way to communicate with others about what was going to happen. We then began to modify our patient appointment calendar. So like I said, previously, we had just given them a list of their appointments. We instead decided to give them a calendar view. On this calendar view, you can not only see the appointments, but you can see the gaps in between when patients have some free time. And any appointment, that is in blue is one where patients are fasting. We found, interestingly, that one of the biggest things that patients wanted to know is, when can I eat? And this gave them a really nice way that at a glance they could plan their day and plan that first meal after fasting appointments. We then moved to our online portal and created a similar view. This view was exciting because then it became clickable. You could click in and have more information and detail for each of these appointments. When you clicked on an appointment, it gave you more information than we would have typically. So it said who you're going to be meeting with, the nature of the conversation. Is this an informational conversation? Is this a conversation where you'll need to make a decision? And what patient education will you be reviewing in that appointment? So the patient can preview this education and see all of that. Additionally, if you clicked on an appointment in the past, it would show you the clinical note from that appointment and again show you the patient education that you reviewed. So if you said, I talked to the doctor on Tuesday, what happened? You could go back to that appointment on Tuesday, see the clinical note, and then also see all the materials that you reviewed together. We began to develop handouts for patients that articulated who our care team was and what their role is on their team. It's very confusing for patients to see several different providers and also see several different types of providers. This showed not only what people do and how they contribute to your care team, but how they worked together. This culminated in what we really think is the centerpiece of our project. It's called our CAR T-cell therapy treatment workbooks. Initially, we had really thought we'd be creating something high tech and an app, something really exciting and shiny. And what we found is that patients really wanted something in their hands that explained what was happening. We created 3 workbooks that patients moved throughout the experience. This gave the patients the experience, the impression of moving through and kind of graduating from one workbook to the next. Patients really universally felt that this was something that impacted their experience significantly. We found patients who had dog-eared this, written in it. And importantly, as caregivers shifted over time, patients could transfer this from caregiver to caregiver so that there's continuity in the experience that they were having, the information that they were seeing. Within the workbook, there are several elements. First is an overview for what the workbook is and how we will use it, and what CAR T-cell therapy is. Each encounter that the patient has with a provider or another team member has a 2-page spread that's already planned. It says what will happen in this appointment, the important information, It tells you what you're going to discuss and what common questions that other patients have at this appointment. This was important not only for our patients, but for our care team as well. So the CAR T hematologist could say, that question you have is really good, and the social worker might have an answer for you. And so what we would see is the hematologist would then turn to the social work page and help them write that in the question and notes page. Additionally, we requested that the providers and the teams not just hand this to the patient, but instead write in it with them. So once they put their plan together, they would take time and physically write in this book. This is one of the reasons that this ended up being a physical paper workbook rather than an iPad app or something that you do on your computer. We found it's really unlikely that a provider will ever take someone else's device and write in it, but they feel okay writing in someone's workbook. Another need that the patients had was for really frank explanations of the side effects that they would be experiencing. So we put two new types of pages together. One was looking at what exactly would they be experiencing from a clinical perspective with neurotoxicity, for example. Importantly, we didn't just give them the list of clinical symptoms that they would have, but we gave them experiences that other CAR T patients and caregivers were having so they could contextualize it. This was really a game changer for us. When we first would shadow patients, we'd hear them told numerous times that they would be having these neurological reactions. It wasn't until we handed out the workbook where it said, this is what other CAR T cell therapy patients are saying, and this is what other CAR T cell therapy caregivers are saying, the patient said, oh, I understand now. Now I know what is going to happen. After their infusion and care, we felt it was very important to create meaningful information there as well. So we helped them understand not only what it was that they would be experiencing afterward, but how they choose a caregiver, who helps them, how do they plan for these things. We also created a 2-page spread that was intended for their home provider. Even though we send a comprehensive letter and their clinical notes to their home provider, we often find that patients face the burden of the provider saying, so what happened at Mayo Clinic? What was that all about? And through a 2-page spread, we gave them the language to speak to their provider, say, this is what happened. These were the dates. Here were my test results. And these are the things that happened to me. It also says to the home provider, these are the things that you need to be able to take care of, and you should feel confident taking care of things like your flu shot and regular visits. And here are the things that you should call Mayo Clinic about. CAR T cell therapy is something that is very challenging for patients to plan for because the dates can shift over time. So while we couldn't give them a firm range of dates or calendar, we could give them a tool that they could work with the nurse coordinators on to understand in general what they should be expecting. So we showed them all of the steps, and the nurse coordinator would give them date ranges to expect and then notes about why that might change over time. Finally, one of our interventions was to text our patients. We would text them with appointment reminders. We'd also text them after their infusion to take their temperature and to evaluate their neurological symptoms. They would get texts several times a day. And we initially thought, how annoying will this be? It will be so irritating for some of these patients. It was quite the opposite, though. Patients said, I feel unbelievably well cared for and that someone is paying attention to me. And so this simple intervention allowed patients to feel connected to the care team and safer, and it led to fewer calls about things that didn't need to be reviewed and helped them make calls at the right time to the care team. We did warm handoffs from the infusion point to the hospital, from outpatient to inpatient. We made sure that the care team was working together and did that in front of the patient. Often we work together and consult with each other behind the scenes, but it doesn't often happen in front of the patient. So we asked the care team to demonstrate this to the patient. That was incredibly effective and made the patient feel cared for, even if it was someone that they didn't know. You can see here that as we mapped the journey after the infusion, that we saw some significant changes. It went from things saying, This was the scariest thing that I had ever experienced, or one of the worst experiences of my life, to patients saying, this was really hard, but I felt like Mayo Clinic was with me the entire time. And we felt that all of these things together, not one single intervention, has allowed us to create a philosophy around care that has empowered the care team to do what is really in the patient's best interest. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to my presentation. I will welcome your comments either by email or any other mode. Thank you.